So this is something that we cover in the strategy section. Like, let's see if we have a Wordly map somewhere here. I think it's in the strategy section. So this is a Wordly map, for example, right? Like, there's two axes. One is like sort of baseline, the lowest part of the stack, and then the top of the y-axis is the most visible user-facing part of the stack. Then it goes left to right from original invention all the way to commodification, where everyone takes it for granted. And in this way, you can sort of track the value chain of an entire industry from source to destination, essentially. And so I've noticed that this tool was launched this week, which is it was use interval, and there was a pretty interesting subtweet by Justin from I think this guy basically is actually a VC, so he should not be so loose, but he is. So he actually is he's a little bit too honest about this. Let me just talk a little bit. So he was actually subtweeting this exact same tool, basically saying how many people can embarrass themselves with exact worst copies of Retool 3 years late. Retool being the original Y Combinator internal tool startup. Retool YC. So I think they're one of the most successful YC companies, I think now at a 1.9 billion valuation. And there's a lot of clones of them, including BuddyBase, which is something that is in the sort of Svelte ecosystem. So basically, I was just thinking about, like, can we Wordly map all these tools and figure out what they're all doing differently? Because there's also like airplane.dev, code to internal apps. In minutes, everything, and these do slightly different things from these guys, which do slightly different things from these guys. And it's just all like a very interesting part of low code, no code, where it's not end user or customer facing, it's actually internal facing, because there are a number of reasons to do that, right? Like, one is you don't have to worry about the design so much. So you can churn out apps a lot faster when you don't have to worry about design. And two, you maybe don't have to worry about security so much because everyone who uses it by definition is an employee. So those are very interesting elements. And I think I don't really have a sense of how this tool differs from this tool, differs from this tool. And so someone like Julius could come along and provide clarity on that. And that would be a really good blog post, because everyone would then start referring to it. The best way that people do that now is they have landscapes, low code, no code landscape, right? You'll see a lot of these charts where, oh, look at all these logos that we've assembled into like this, they all do this and they all do this, but it's not really informative. It doesn't tell you like what parts of the stack these cover. Maybe some of these have larger circles than others, and it's just not informative. It's just a collection of logos. So I think my sort of hypothesis is that actually Wordly maps are better than landscapes. Yep. That's my, yeah.
I agree with that too.
So I guess
I'm biased.
Yeah, what I would do is I would search, internal tools. And then maybe if you want to filter it faster, you can do like show agent, right? So there's Loadify, Flowdash, Notebook, Wax.run, Office XLR, AirCrud. I don't know. Some of these are not worth spending any time on, but there have definitely been a lot of launches that maybe could be useful for tracking. Like basically, if you could build a map that people can use to decide what tool to adopt, that would be a very, very useful map to have. It's like a buying guide almost, because there's all this marketing bullshit, right? Like everyone has like the same marketing bullshit. Oh, like spend less time building, undifferentiated heavy lifting, and then more time doing actual things that you get paid for. Everyone has the marketing bullshit, but to get behind the marketing bullshit, you have to really talk about functionalities and who does what. That's my hope for. That's my wish list, basically.
All right.
I don't know how to distinguish between all these, but if I had the time, that's what I would do to become an expert in this industry. Cool. All right.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks. That's clear.
nice follow up on Worley mapping. Thank you. Anyone else has other questions or thoughts that they had during the week on problems they're working on? The point of this being live is that we can talk, right? This is a meetup, not a lecture. Jay, it sounds like you had something to. No. All right, crickets. Alfredo, what's up?
Just curious. I don't know if it is the right time, but I'm creating a digital garden and kind of second brain and whatever, all that.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering about how to do web mentions or citations. Do you recommend either, or how do we mention things from other authors?
Yeah, well, mentions should be picked up by whatever the web mention engine is. So for those who don't know, this would be another educational section, I guess. Web mention is a indie web movement. And web mention IO is a service that helps you track all these mentions and they send you all the pings. So you yourself should not have to do anything to be tracked. Maybe you might want to submit your website to make sure that it's being tracked, but by default, it should be eventually tracked. For you to display the mentions from other people, like the only thing that you do is just you drop a link, right? When you reference someone else's content, they'll link to you. So I have this set up for my own website. So let's just say this one. You'll get a bunch of comments from other blogs. Some of them are tweets, some of them are other blogs. Let me see if there's another blog. A lot of these are tweets. Yeah, a lot of these are tweets. Let's see.
So when someone tweets, they automatically link.
Oh man, this page doesn't exist. What is going on? This looks like a banned website, whatever. Anyway, so like when you drop a link, it should be picked up by a web mention service like this guy. And that is hopefully how it's supposed to work, but I don't think it's a little bit brittle. I'll definitely say that. Anyway, if you want to display it, you just hook into here. There are a bunch of examples. I think the best example is this guy. Oops. So he wrote the best introduction to web mentions here. So yeah, I recommend you check it out. I think it's basically a really nice alternative to social media where there's no central authority apart from web mention IO, but web mention IO can be replicated by Bridgie. There are like 3 or 4 other services that all do the same thing. So I think the best way to discover this, I think it's indie web mentions or something like that here. It gives you all the index of all the services that do the same thing. And yeah, it's a really nice movement. I would say like it's obviously smaller than traditional social media, but I really like it as a form of decentralized, I guess, commenting or attribution or conversation online.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Yeah, welcome. Questions, thoughts? All right. That was a really good set. I mean, this is more than normal. So thanks for all that questions. Okay, shall we talk about conferences? So basically, when I wrote this, I had some conference experience. Basically, I think I've done 2 times more conferences since then. I would say substantially all of this is still applicable. And so like the reason I chose to focus on CFPs, well, so first thing, maybe we'll talk about the high level, like why is it useful to speak at conferences? There are a couple of reasons. One is that it helps establish you as an expert on whatever your topic is in the industry. 2, and 2, it helps you network with other conference speakers who may themselves be topics and experts in their field, and that's a really nice way to build your network. And 3 is actually a really nice way to experience conferences, because it's harder as someone who's just an attendee to approach other attendees. But if everyone knows that you were at the conference to speak about that thing, they can come up to you and have a topic of conversation to bring up. So I've actually, this is a pretty common advice actually. Like if you're an introvert, you actually want to speak about something so that you give everyone a way to connect with you rather than being like the general social person that that may struggle a little bit harder in a general social setting. That is very much the traditional in-person conference. That switches a little bit with online conferences. Online conferences are mostly about getting events out there, maybe announcing some stuff, but obviously you have less in-person interaction. And there are a lot of people who are trying to fix that interaction phenomenon, mostly with Discord chats or YouTube chats, but it's still very hard. There are a lot of speakers actually who've just sworn off online speaking entirely because they just don't see the same benefit that they do in-person speaking. So that's what I would say there. The reason I focus on CFPs rather than just general speaking stuff is that if you don't get the CFPs, you don't get a speaking slot, you don't get to speak anyway. So this is more important to understand how to get into a conference than it is to speak for now. I mean, after quite a bit of practice, I'm sure you'll get it. Does anyone have like experience with like conference speaking? I know Ron's done one of the best talks at Spell Summit for a long time. Just like reflections or thoughts, conference speaking. I'm gonna throw it open to folks.
Yeah, I'll parrot what Sean said about it, just opening up a lot for you. It was probably my entry point into my career, in fact. One thing I'd say, if you've never given it a try before, just apply anyway, send in a proposal. The worst they can do is, not accept your talk. But if you're worried that, you've never spoken before, or, the internet doesn't know who you are, that doesn't matter. They're just looking for what they want for a conference organizer. They're just looking for ways to make people have a good time. So if your talk is interesting, or, you may not even have that much experience, but your experience might be unique, that could be good enough. So apply anyway. And the networking effect is massive, because you could be speaking to someone and they'll say, oh, hey, you gave that little weird talk, ages ago, right? And then there's that connection, and you just learn so much about whatever topic. Oh, there's another tip. Even if you don't think you're an expert on it, do it anyway, because by the end of it, you will be an expert, because it doesn't have to be perfect, of course. I won't say that, you don't have to worry about being professional and slick, still do it, but you still care. So whatever topic you're going to speak about, you're going to research it. You're going to watch other talks on it. You're going to read articles about it. And by the end of it, like, you'll just have galvanized all this random knowledge across the internet, and you'll know more about it, and you'll become an expert just by virtue of, by having to. So do it even if you're worried about not being good enough or well-known enough, or even having enough experience speaking.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, I think Ron started giving talks before he was a full-time web developer, right?
Yeah.
So it was part of your career transition story that you wanted to do this, even though you were kind of learning web development on the side, or you did web development on the side. But by putting yourself out there, you managed to build up this portfolio. I want to just show people this. I mean, obviously, you also have like really good design chops and you have really good creative ideas. But then your talks also stood out even as on the other side as the conference organizer, or the people who pick conferences. Like you knew how to write CFPs that made things interesting and made people want to watch. And so I don't know if you have any tips around that.
Yeah, so try to highlight why your talk might be different, and not just the topic. You could say you're talking about, I don't know, Web3 or VR or something exciting, but it's not the topic itself that you want to sell. It's your take on it that you want to sell. So we're probably going to, the book itself goes into like outlaying your proposal well, but I'd say just the essentials are, have like, just a short paragraph at the top that, sells it in, 2 sentences or so, 2 or 3. Having an outline really helps your talk be, because there's a risk, especially if like someone's never given a talk before, and most conferences, or not most, a lot of conferences, they're happy to take on first-time speakers. But if you want to allay some of those concerns, have an outline, and that's already going to put you way above a lot of other proposals. Sometimes people, I've talked to other organizers before, and some of them they just like write off the bat because they've written just a few sentences saying, "Hey, I want to talk about CSS," and they have generally still an idea, but that's not enough to capture them. So sell them in like the first 2 or 3 sentences and have an outline, and that's already going to put you at near the top of the pile.
Yeah. So maybe I'll give some examples of an outline and what some accepted talks look like. So I think I have a good thread here. Basically, when I wrote up my CFP advice, you can search for this, by the way. It's always down in here. This is one of those open chapters of the book. And so there's some share about accepted CFPs. So for example, you can see how people have short descriptions, long descriptions, have the title, have an outline of what the talk is going to be about. This is really good planning and basically gives conference organizers a really good idea of what you're going to be talking about anyway. I would say actually there are a lot of conferences that don't even ask for this. Most of the time you just have the title. The title, like if the title is good enough, like that actually matters a lot. In fact, I talked a little bit about this. Like a really good title would just sell the talk already, because a lot of times that's what the attendees are going to see anyway, and that's it. They're not even going to read the description. But obviously description or abstract is like the next best thing. I myself, I think I actually shared my first my own first blog post in there. Oh yeah, here. So I shared a list of CFPs, and you can see, for example, this is the first one I ever did. That was here. And it was very, very long because this was a very competitive conference. So you want to definitely put in more effort onto this. And you even have sometimes you'll be asked for like a pitch to the review committee, like why, explain the theme and flow, and then why are you the best person to speak about it, that kind of thing. So it can be that intensive, or it can just be literally a title and a description, and that's it. It really depends on all sorts. And then for the most recent one, I would say I tend to put titles, the outline of my talks on the website for the talk. So there'll be like, here's all the planning that I did while researching the talk, and I just put it up there. So this is literally an outline that I did 2 months ago. So if you want to see how people work live, like I think there are a lot of people who just share this stuff, and it's not that hard. It's not that inaccessible. People want you to speak more. They're happy to share their knowledge. So I'll just drop this link for you to have a look in the Zoom chat. Yeah, it's not that, I mean, there's a lot of people who are happy to share their advice. All right. I think Chad, you had your hand up. Unless I answered.
Yeah. I mean, this question probably got answered, but during the conversation, but like, what if you don't necessarily have a subject to talk about, like where you want to kind of give a talk, or you're kind of on the fence of giving a talk, but you don't necessarily have something that you feel super confident about talking about.
Okay. The confidence, you have to separate the confidence thing from like picking the topic, right? Like the confidence, you'll always doubt yourself, especially when you're new to this whole game. So you cannot trust your own instincts on confidence, right? Obviously, there's some things where it would help if you know more than others. But again, just like Ron said, like once you've committed to give the talk, you can actually spend a lot more time. Like, for example, for my first talk, I had a lead time of 4 months to research everything that's ever been written everywhere for putting this talk together. And I really did that. But so you don't have to know everything when pitching the talk. You just have to pitch the right idea, and like if it fits their needs, they will give you the slot. That there are a lot of things that you can do to prove it out before then. You can speak at smaller meetups, including internally within the company as well as locally, to just practice and get some validation. You can tweet about it, you can blog about it. Basically, all of this is just testing grounds for what do people respond to, right? If you see something that is just has much more traction than the others, then that is a natural talk topic because you've already proven it out before you spent the time in building that talk, right? So that's part of the learning public journey, right? Like you don't necessarily know what has value unless you just constantly just share, any insights, any work in progress, any opinions and news, and you just see it. You just have a natural feel of what is relevant. So does that help with topic choice? Basically, let people choose for you.
No, it does. It does. So I guess as you were speaking, I was kind of like, if I were to give a talk, I don't necessarily think I would, mostly because of my previous article series that I've been writing. I think I'm pretty decent and at least kind of having people go on a journey with me. And so I was going to talk about the organization that I'm kind of running now. And because somebody had suggested that I give that as a talk. And so I was kind of thinking about that. So I wanted to also ask, like, how are talks where they're not necessarily technical, but they're more about like the person's growth, like I guess more about the journny. How those work? How do those work? Sorry.
So I can give you some from my personal experience, but obviously there are other people who have done that. So I saw this talk, which was pretty well received. Yeah, so here's an example. Erin actually did this as a lightning talk at Chain Reacts, which is the top React Native conference. So I think it's very brave to go out there and say, I'm new to this and this is my journey, but I'm sharing it anyway. Oh, this looks like it was the clone. It wasn't the canonical link. Yeah, this is probably the link. So yeah, this is a 10-minute talk about her journey as learning React Native, sharing her experiences and lessons and all that. And I think every conference essentially has room for a few of these, right? Not every, you're probably not going to have a whole conference just about journeys, because most people are more interested in tools than journeys, right? But I think if you are able to pitch your journey in an interesting way, like I think people would be interested in that. So yeah, I mean, there are these kinds of talks. I see them less because I'm personally like not really consuming a lot of those talks. But I mean, they're out there and people have done them before. So if you want a role model, Erin is one of those.
All right, thanks so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I will say, like, don't make this like a pet. Well, what do I mean by pet? Don't make this your only thing. Have multiple shots on goal on like what talks you're trying to develop. Like, I'd rather you work on like 10 different talk ideas at the same time and then just pick the one that people most want out of you, than work on only one and try to pitch it everywhere.
No, I understand. So it's just pretty much just be diverse in terms.
Exactly. Diversify your speaking capability. I used to have a list of my old talks. I don't know if I have them anymore. Yeah, I don't know where I put them. But basically, I used to have like this public list of like talk ideas that I was currently pitching to any conference, and I just posted it. And if like any conference organizer wanted it from me, I'll be like, okay, like now that'll be what I worked on. But it didn't really work. I will say that it did help me in brainstorming talk ideas. Like if you just don't force it, if you just sit down, force yourself, like what is interesting? What do you think you could go on stage and spend 10 to 25 minutes on? There are a lot of interesting ideas out there and stories to tell. And basically, as a speaker, you're a storyteller, you're a educator, and yeah, I think there's any number of talks that are interesting. I linked basically all my favorite talks in that chapter, so you can check out. Job advice number one I had was advice number one is speak at a meetup. Like basically just get speaking experience where it's low stakes. But also advice number one is watch a lot of talks. Like you just get a sense of what people in the talk universe do, and it gives you some inspiration as to what's possible. And you never really know until you really discover like what people have done before. And you may like, I think there will be a huge gap between the talks that you really admire and the talks that you personally can do. So don't hold yourself to too high of a standard, but at least it gives you some inspiration as like the stuff that people do. So I give you a lot of ideas into genres. Like you can tell war stories, you can launch a library, you can say how to X, you can do introduction to X, you can do what's new in X, you can do fundamentals, you can do live coding. Like there's a lot of different genres of talks that you can see as you develop your knowledge of like what people do in conferences. And one of these things will appeal more to you than others. So I really like live coding because I happen to, it helps to slow me down actually, because I speak very fast. It helps to slow me down and people like to follow along, and there's a risk of failure. People like when you can screw up. So there's that. But then, you know, there's fundamentals talks. I've never done this. There's intro to X talks, but I've given examples every single place. Like intro to X talks are really good for fundamental knowledge that will never change, right? You just need to give the most interesting take on it that you can possibly do, and that's a good talk. So I really like this one, for example. Color theory, nothing new, but talking about color theory with Ninja Turtles, that's new. So yeah, really liked it.
I just want to add about confidence. I think it was Jeff Atwood, the guy who does coding horror. He said that when you give a talk and you have bad bits and good bits, people will very conveniently forget the bad parts. Like if you stuff up or say something slightly off, and they'll remember the awesome parts of your talk. Because you think about it, when everyone sits down to watch your talk, whether it's in person or online, they're not looking, they're hoping to get something for their time. So they're looking for those good bits, and they're not like looking to nitpick you. So don't worry about, if you're not confident about it, pulling it off perfectly or all that.
Yeah, the internet is a max function, not an average function. So you actually want to be as spiky as possible. I actually don't remember anything about Ron's previous talk, except that he had the green screen behind around his head. But everyone loved it because it really stood out. But then obviously it really helped with retention and getting attention. And yeah, part of speaking is entertaining, right? You're not just there to deliver information. People are going to remember how they feel about you more than they remember what you said. Cool. Oh, Rich Harris. What's his link? Yeah, this. So yeah, I mean, this is creative. I think basically any effort whatsoever into making your experience stand out even a little bit puts you ahead of most people in speaking, because like most people are just even terrified just to speak. And if you have like, I don't know, some sound effects like sitcom laughing or whatever, or just like little things to spice up the presentation, I think it really goes. So for example, another one that a recent example that I really like, so there's hi Trad Boy. There was a recent conference on databases. Databases is the most boring thing you can possibly imagine in computer science. Nothing visual, right? And like all these guys are like, maybe they're sort of academics, they're research people in machine learning. This is the kind of talks that they give, like minimum effort, like stitched on thing. I'm not criticizing them. Like they are doing their best already, right? Because like it's already a big lift to do a talk at all, right? But the people that stand out go a little bit further because they understand how to give a good presentation that's entertaining. And so what he does is role play. He'll edit himself in with, this is just the same. This is
You know what? I might.
And having a little bit of role play, a little bit of storytelling really makes the talk a lot more entertaining, right? So it's almost like basically stealing the tricks of YouTubers and then, superimpose stuff on this, just instead of standard presentation of slides. And you see Rich Harris also do the same thing. My favorite one is, he had this one. There's a moment in here that is just amazing. So look at this. He's drawing a chart with his finger. And then he's basically trying to talk a little bit about a crossover point between Svelte and React, but he's drawing it in camera and actually post-editing it to track along, to really make his point. But you don't see stuff like this in a standard presentation, right? This is kind of what really gets people to pay attention and think of you as a speaker that stands out. Just tricks, bag of tricks. That's all it is. Chad, you had a question.
Yeah. This might be kind of changing the topic a little bit, but how do you feel about kind of like talks in the post-COVID world, like, or in-person talks, like, how do you kind of navigate that? Because that might be, jarring, not jarring, but anxiety inducing, to be quite honest.
Oh, everyone should be vaccinated. So you're not taking any more than the minimum risk anyway. I just don't worry about it anymore. As long as like, most venues will say like everyone must be vaccinated to attend this talk. Some of them will require masks, but increasingly more and more do not require masks anymore, just because we are adjusting to COVID as a standard part of life. You take whatever risk you are comfortable with, right? Let's say you have an elderly family member at home, you want to expose yourself less. That is absolutely reasonable. But yeah, it's totally up to you how you manage that risk. Are you only talking about in person? Because I assume that's the only part there with the risk.
Online yeah. Because I'd say yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in person, I've done a couple of in-person talks already. People are adjusting. Like, so for example, the recent Reactathon talk that I did, they had an open air venue, right? So you're not recycling air all the time. Like, basically leave it to the conference organizers to handle that for you. You focus on giving it the best talk you can possibly give.
Oh, okay, cool. Do you? Oh, yeah. Okay. No problem. Thanks.
Yeah. I'll say like definitely the giving online talks is a very different nature, and essentially you are a YouTuber. That's the level of skill that you have to. It's a very different skill for speaking in person, and you don't necessarily have to adopt all those tricks to be a really engaging and compelling speaker, but it helps because it basically like that's the new medium that's been unlocked, and that unlocks a set of tools that were previously not possible in the offline medium. Therefore, people who use those will stand out. Okay, and then I think the most interesting part I would say about the CFP process. Yeah, so essentially I talk about submitting multiple CFPs per conference until you get known for being a speaker. That is a very key part of the advice, I would say. Obviously, like this is nothing here is a hard and fast rule. If you just have one thing that you're interested in, do that, it's fine. But I think if you just want to get experience as a speaker before you really need to, then you want to maximize your chance of getting a slot. So submitting multiple is absolutely encouraged. There's such a thing as spamming too much of the same topic, and people will notice, and people will dock you points for that. So try to be at least a little bit different in terms of like the number that you submit. So yeah, I mean, I think I give a bunch of examples here. Everything that we talk about in the rest of the chapters applies, just in terms of like learning in public and putting stuff out there and getting accepted. I will say, like, finally, the most important thing about having done a talk once you've done it is that it becomes a calling card for your next talk. Because once people have seen you do a talk, they'll be like, oh, this person's a speaker, like I want to have them at my events. Or if they've never heard of you before, I've actually been asked from previous examples of my talks to give people an idea of the kind of talks that I do. And so that it helps you basically, it's basically a cumulative advantage. And it's something you can build up over in a pretty short period. Like after about a year of speaking, I was an established speaker, and I could basically stop applying to the conferences, and conferences were just inbound to me. And I think that's pretty common in the speaking world, that you just need to show up a few times to be associated with the topic, and then you just get invites from there on out. Yeah, Chad.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of mentioned online talks being kind of different from in-person talks. And you also mentioned kind of not low effort, but just talk venues that have less people and so on and so forth that you could give talks on just to kind of get your feet wet. I kind of wanted to ask about like podcasts and Twitter Spaces as that, to kind of transition to in-person, big conference talks. Would you suggest that as an avenue?
Yes, that absolutely helps. So yeah, it's easy. It's very easy to be a podcast guest on smaller podcasts, because most people are struggling to look for guests. And if you volunteer yourself as a guest, they will probably take you. And it's good practice for you to introduce yourself and to talk about a certain topic. I think it's maybe too but don't confuse yourself that is the same thing as doing a talk, right? Like most of the time, podcasts and Twitter Spaces are conversational. People are meant to be giving like half their attention to it. There's nothing visual. There's you're conveying a lot of information in an audio only format. When it comes to giving a talk, like you should have done a lot of prep into what the content is about, and you should have some sort of visual aid, just because people like that sort of thing. It's again, like none of this is like strictly necessary, because there are people who break the rules, but I'm just talking about the average speaker. But I think it's really good practice for sure. I've had a talk that started as a podcast conversation, and then I turned it into a talk just because people liked it. So yeah.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, does anyone have like specific conferences that they're thinking about applying for? I mean, let's kind of turn this into a workshop discussion.
So I applied to NGConf.
Ooh.
And I was selected, but I am a backup speaker.
Ooh.
But so that is gonna be fun. But the thing that I need to find now, they tell me that I need to practice basically the talk, like practicing another meetup or something.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that I'm struggling with, because there is not too much meetups going on about Angular in in town. So maybe I need to find something online. And
well, this is a meetup.
yeah,
I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. Would you like to? I know you haven't prepared, but would you like to give people a preview of what it's about, and how you're planning the talk, and we can give you feedback on that. You don't have to give the full talk, but just give the outline.
Yeah, right now, or
yeah,
I don't have the slides, but basically I'm gonna talk about how to improve DevX using Storybook and Cypress. And this is kind of targeted for Angular developers, because we see a lot of documentation about how to use Storybook and Cypress with other technologies. But this is basically like what kind of tooling do you need to do a Storybook better DevX, like to make it faster for the Angular developers to start using it, how to use it with other stakeholders, like just not just with developers, but also like for design reviews and stuff like that. And part of this is because why I started this talk is because I see the need of sometimes it's not possible to do end-to-end test. Like it's hard to set up the environments, hard to put together all the data and everything ready for you to do the end-to-end. So one way that we are doing it in my company is that we are setting up a storybook with different mock data or different setups, and then we just use Cypress to run tests in those different pages. So it really speeds up development, and it's really easy to use, right? Like because you have your Storybook to show your states and Cypress to run the test on those states.
Yeah, yeah. So your visuals to back those up. Something that maybe would help is like quantitative data on, like, we used to take this long to do something and then it was shortened to this other thing. That usually helps as well. And yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are interested in working on that workflow. And maybe sample code. I don't know if you have a demo that, like a GitHub repo that people can check out, that is useful as well.
Yeah.
Like how you would implement it on a clean code base. Because you did it at work, but so you can't share that production code.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna look into it.
One thing that is useful actually is, so when I'm designing talks, I don't know how to do this, but I'm just giving you an idea. You don't have to take this idea. When people, let's say they'll design a movie or like a TV episode, there'll be the intro, like the cold intro, like whatever that grabs attention, and then and promises and previews a little bit of what's going to happen later. But then you want to design the emotional journey to ramp up to some kind of climax, and then you want to end it off, but then also have a strong ending. People remember the beginning, the ending, and then whatever the emotional climax is. So maybe, do you have a way to do that, right? Like, so the start could be some kind of problem that you faced. The climax could be like the solution that you arrived at. The ending could be some call to action or some projections about what could be there for the future, right? Like some wish lists of things that you are still working on and whatever. I don't know. I'm just giving you some ideas as to like designing an emotional journey as another layer onto the talk that you're constructing. If that makes sense.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna try to see how to. I have been struggling, like I see, okay, we have the problem and we have the end, but I'm struggling with the climax on how to get there, because basically after I tell the problem, everything is solutioning, right? Like,
yeah,
this is how you structure, this is the kind of tooling that you use for Storybook, then
yeah.
now let's go to Cypress. So I'm not sure if I have a really good climax at any point, or if it is just.
Yeah, I don't have one for you yet. I'm trying to think about that as well. But if anyone has seen a talk that is similar, that was very well done, this would be a good time to share.
Well, Alfredo, in your own opinion, what's the coolest thing about any of it? That can be your climax. Whatever you personally thought was the coolest or most useful.
That is a good point. So I guess, yeah, the best thing is that you can do integration tests really easy, I guess. Everything else is how to get to that point, right? Like how to make it easy to create component stories and stuff like that. But the best thing is that you can now migrate from doing everything end to end. You can just do integration tests with this. So I guess that is the best.
Yeah. So make sure to in your voice, even right down to your voice, when you're giving that talk, make sure that your energy matches that. When the most important point is being delivered, you must like volume louder. Like you're yelling yourself, you're repeating your, you say, if like, I like to do this, right? And in every single talk, you have one card to use and you can only use it once, which is, if you take nothing away from this talk, you should remember this, and then you say the thing, right? Is a verbal flag to the listener that this is the whole point of the talk.
Okay, that's good.
And you only get to use it once, so plan when you're going to use it. But it's very effective because obviously people will be like, oh yeah, okay, I've been zoned out for the past 10 minutes, but now this is the do this. But that verbal modulation it really helps. Don't worry about getting all of this right, by the way. These are just suggestions. Imagine
Right.
like if you do 20 different talks, then you're like, okay, like now I have a baseline, I'm comfortable with just the bare minimum of showing up, doing a competent job. Now how do I level that up? This is the kind of leveling up conversation that we're having.
Okay.
Chad.
Yeah. I guess kind of going back to your earlier question, like with my own question, but how do you choose where do you go? Like which talk, not talks, but which conference you decide that you want to try and talk at? Like what
Yeah.
even goes into that process?
Honestly, when I was starting out, you just go to whatever will have you. It's more important to plug into a list of like CFPs. So I give a couple of CFP sources there. I think CFP Land is the best one. The Mozilla Dev Network also have like a list of CFPs that come up. Then I guess there's just a question of like, are they local, close to you? Is it easy to go on, or do you have to travel halfway around the world? There's definitely a lot less, like I have just decided to travel a lot less for conferences just because it's really a drag to pull yourself out of work for one day to travel there, do your talk for 2 days, and be a part of the conference for 2 days, and then come back and burn another day coming back. It's just a lot. It's I don't think it's good for the planet and not good for health as well and productivity. So yeah, travel aside, I think you want to look at the people that you look up to, the people that are also in your fields, and whether or not if they're there, then you want to hang out with them, then apply for those talks. That's basically it.
So follow-up question, what if you're stuck on an island and you have to leave the island to give a talk?
Then absolutely, travel anyway, right? I think like it's such a huge boost to your network just because when you are a speaker, like you get a certain amount of attention given to you, and you get to network with other speakers. This will build your network even after the talk. For years after the talk, I'm still having conversations with people that I met from conferences. So for you, like, because you're not at a tech hub, right, your number one problem is that you don't have a strong network. And so this is the best way to sort of bootstrap a network, by simulating as though you were in a tech hub, by being at those conferences. And maybe people only see you once a year at a conference, but they still feel like they have a stronger connection to you as though you live close to them, even though you don't.
So it kind of sounds like if you're not in a tech hub, it's almost a requirement for kind of growing your career in a sense.
Nothing is a requirement. Nothing is a requirement. It just helps. I'll never say it's a requirement.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I definitely think it helps. So for example, if I were to be permanently based in Singapore, it is an island. It is not a tech hub. It is very far from where the tech power centers of the world are. But if I were to speak like 2-3 times a year in US conferences, I would be perceived as part of that ecosystem, even though I'm physically not. Right? So like that really helps.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Do you personally choose US conferences to kind of keep that established link to the
Yeah, I
United
mean,
States?
I'll be honest, like that wasn't a conscious choice, right? That was just because when I changed careers, I was in New York anyway, and just being in New York, you're closer to a lot of people.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So it wasn't a conscious choice, but it worked out. Yeah, for you, I would make the conscious choice. I would actually, I do recommend it to you.
Sean, I think you and Ron, both of you have experience speaking. So I have an idea. I'm trying to see if I can get an instant evaluation if the idea works and how this should be pitched. So it's all about web performance. We had a website running on Laravel. It's really slow. That was used to slow, and we took that and we moved it to a site that now has 92 plus and 90 plus Lighthouse scores. And it was a process of, so it was a Laravel site, and it was a Laravel based site. We had Cloudflare in front of it. So the basics were there, but still our site was not performing well. So we had to untangle all the problems. So sometimes it's, first of all, we looked at why it is slow. There was, and it was the asset, there were a lot of assets. We were downloading web fonts and stuff like that. And then we moved methodically, we identified the right, we identified how we can improve them. Like we made some architecture changes. So one thing our Google Analytics said, oh yeah, basically the process of it, like the Google Analytics said, most of 95% of our users drop off after the first page. That was an insight. So why download all of our JavaScript and CSS and everything needed for every single page? Like usually we bundle them in one, but that was an insight to say, okay, if most people bounce, don't load the whole thing, just load the minimum for that page. So Svelte and Tailwind exactly served their purpose. So we made a conscious decision choice of moving to a framework like that. And so we used Svelte and moved that. And we still had and then image formats, improving image formats. And beyond that, so we got all the technical details right. And then the next thing we saw was our marketing folks were putting in their own scripts on the pages. So then, it's not all about the devs, like we were doing everything right. And then the marketing guys were doing things, and now we had to solve for that, right? And then that's where PartyTown came in, and a lot of their marketing scripts were moved into PartyTown and solve that problem. And then over a period of time, some other dev would come in and make changes again and make the site slow. So we put monitoring in place, we put performance testing in place, all of that. It's a process of getting there, right? Is this worth the talk? Or is it too commoditized at this point?
I think it is, the way that you pitched it, it is not commoditized. There are quite a bit of commoditized performance talks, but I think your journey is very up to date. Your solutions are very cutting edge that people want to learn how to do. So no, it's not commoditized. You still have to do it well. So I have two examples of performance talks in the book. I put it in the Zoom chat as well. And I'll say, like, there's a way to do it well where you're telling a story with a very clear beginning, middle, and end that these guys do well. So I would recommend studying some other similar performance talks and seeing how you can design your talk to get people involved in, like, the beauty about performance talk is that you're, just because you showed up, you basically promised that you solved it already, right? So the only thing you have to do is present how bad it was and then present the stories along the way. And if there's a process or a framework that you can abstract that says, all right, there's some stuff that is specific to me, but for the end of the talk, here's how you can take away some lessons that and anyone can follow. That can be a useful takeaway as well. So something that they can quote, something that can memorize, something you can say, like, this is the 3-step process to optimizing performance. Yeah, check this, check that, check that. That is useful.
Yeah, I think there is, it's not a project. Performance is not a one-time project. It's sort of it's like a diet. It should be a lifestyle. How diets are a lifestyle. It should be like that. And because it has to be consistent, constantly monitored, anyone will mess up. Like, you can only contribute negatively, right? Contributing positively to performance in any project is usually doesn't happen. Yeah. So I think that would be the key thing that I've learned so far, as when we did this work. Is
right. So maybe some stuff about automated tooling to prevent regressions in performance can be put in there. But yeah, I mean, this is a thing that people relate to, and I think it's all about, like, trying to figure out how to package the idea, right? Like, a really good name, a really good framework, a really good visual about how to keep on top of performance. I think it would help a lot, because, like, what you're doing now is storytelling. Everyone has stories. Everyone has, like, oh man, it's hard, right? So it's up to you to try to propose a solution that people can take away. I don't have one, by the way. This is one of those things where I've experienced this and I don't know the answer. So if you can give the answer, that'd be great.
What kind of conferences are this the best fit? Because there are most nowadays. And
right. Any conference in the web development sphere. There are quite a few, I guess, performance-focused conferences that you might want to pitch it to. So Netlify had one in the Jamstack Conf. I think it would fit in those in that conference. I'm not sure they're still doing it anymore. The problem with like all my existing knowledge of conferences is this was pre-COVID. So I could tell you to go to performance.now, which used to be held in Amsterdam, but I don't know if it's still running because all these conferences stopped during COVID, and I don't know if they started back up again. So you'd have to look a little bit into what people are doing these days to figure out like what people are doing in 2022. For example, there's a CFP open right now for GitHub Universe, which is GitHub's primary conference. And if you can tell a story about how you use GitHub to do this work, then that might be accepted, right? So you just like pay attention to the open CFPs out there and see what's out there. So for example, there's another one, which is, so I'm currently curator for QCon SF. QCon is the company behind InfoQ, which is behind a lot of sort of backend and systems oriented technologies. And so they would be interested in something that is a little bit more backend. I don't know. You just have to have like a knowledge of all the conferences out there and see what fits. I don't really know where this goes. I would say you have to get a little bit creative, I guess. Or if you don't find the conference that you like, make your own. There's always, I mean, like someone has to start a conference, right? And like there's no World Conference Authority that says like you must fit all these requirements to make a conference. You just start one and try your best. And yeah, I mean, someday I feel like so with Swell Society, like we kind of did that. But someday I feel like there is a bigger thing that I might do in the future. So let's see. Because it is stressful and it is hard, but at the end of the day, it's such a really good service to the community. And because you're a conference organizer, you're like one level network above a regular speaker, like because you like get to decide who joins. That's amazing. And there's any number of companies that are willing to sponsor conferences. There's a basically unlimited budget. It's really surprising actually, because the ROI on conferences is not that high for marketing purposes, but whatever, people like to sponsor conferences. Oops, sorry, I pressed the wrong thing. So yeah, that's the conference debate. I think there's a lot of discussion here, and people are at different stages. Like Ron's given a couple of talks. Alfredo is about to give his first talk. Like, I'm always happy to give advice. I'll consider myself a B tier speaker, which is like, people know who I am. I get invites, but I'm not like, I don't have talks with like 1 million views. To me, like I've met those people. They're just like us. They just happen to have the right mix of presentation and topic choice that really connected. So if you want my thoughts on getting to that tier of speaking where you're known as a speaker and you're always flying everywhere to invite to speak about stuff, I'm happy to help you as much as I can. Yeah, it's definitely helped my own career as well. Cool. All right, I'll call it there because we've already gone for an hour, but happy to stay behind to ask and answer any last minute questions. But otherwise, have a great week, everyone. I will sign off with what is the shutdown message? I guess we have a shutdown message, but also we have like I don't know, we'll just do it guys. Thanks everyone. All right, I'll stop recording. Does anyone have like